The pregnancy test in Heijin's trembling hands felt like a death sentence disguised as two pink lines. At 24, debt from his father's failed business and his family's eviction had driven him to accept what seemed like a legitimate job opportunity. The promised salary of 5 million won per month had been his lifeline, a chance to pull his family from homelessness and his younger siblings from desperation. CEO Kang Hyun-soo, powerful and magnetic, had greeted him in a luxurious penthouse office, his demeanor charming yet unnervingly intense. Heijin had understood this was no ordinary interview. The position required discretion and absolute loyalty. He'd accepted the offered drink to calm his nerves, never imagining it was drugged. What happened next existed only in fragmented nightmares, being unable to move, Hyun-soo's hands claiming what was never offered, a cold voice promising, "You'll give me exactly what I need." When Heijin woke alone and violated, he'd run, scrubbed himself raw, and tried to forget. But now, staring at the positive test, Heijin understood with horrible clarity. He'd been targeted, drugged, and used as a breeding vessel by a monster in expensive suits. And as his phone rang with an unknown number, relentless as a predator's call, Heijin knew with cold certainty that Hyun-soo had been watching, waiting for this very moment. The alpha was coming to claim what he believed he owned. This was violation, but Heijin's only option was survival, even if it meant losing his freedom, his dignity, and his future to a man who saw him as nothing more than a carrier for his heirs. Before I tell you how I ended up here, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers, and tell me where you're watching from. Heijin woke to silk sheets and sunlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows, and for 3 blissful seconds, he thought the nightmare had ended. Then he tried to sit up, and his body screamed with the memory of violation. The room came into focus, enormous, decorated in shades of cream and gold, with furniture that cost more than his family's entire yearly income. A prison cell designed by an interior decorator. He stumbled to the door. Locked. Of course it was locked. The handle turned from the outside, and Hyun-soo entered as if he owned not just the mansion but Heijin himself. Which, Heijin supposed with bitter clarity, the alpha believed he did. Hyun-soo looked immaculate in a crisp white shirt, his dark eyes assessing Heijin with the same cold calculation from that terrible night. "You're awake. Good." Hyun-soo's voice was calm, almost pleasant, as if they were discussing the weather. "We have things to discuss. Let me out." Heijin's voice came out rougher than intended, his throat raw from screaming himself hoarse the night before as Hyun-soo's men dragged him from his apartment. No. The simplicity of it was more terrifying than threats. Hyun-soo moved to the window, looking out over manicured gardens that stretched endlessly. "You're carrying my child, Heijin. You'll stay here where I can ensure you receive proper care, the best doctors, nutritious meals, everything you need. Everything except freedom. Freedom is overrated when you're drowning in debt." Hyun-soo turned, and something flickered in those dark eyes. Not quite sympathy, but acknowledgement. "Your family's eviction has been postponed. Your siblings' school fees are paid through the year. Consider it a down payment." Rage ignited in Heijin's chest, white-hot and purifying. "You can't buy me. I already did." The words landed like blows. 3 weeks ago you became mine. The pregnancy simply made it permanent. Heijin lunged at him, nails aimed at those cold, handsome features. Hyun-soo caught his wrists effortlessly, his grip firm but not painful, which somehow made it worse. If he'd been cruel, Heijin could have hated cleanly. Instead, Hyun-soo simply held him until the fight drained away, leaving only exhaustion. "I won't make this harder than it needs to be," Hyun-soo said quietly, releasing him. "But understand this, you're not leaving. Not until the baby is born. After that, we'll discuss terms." The door closed behind him with a soft click. The lock engaged with brutal finality. For 2 days, Heijin refused to eat. Staff brought elaborate meals on silver trays, and he hurled them at the walls, watching expensive food slide down imported wallpaper. He tried the windows, sealed. He tried screaming, soundproofed. He tried the door again and again until his hands were bruised. Hyun-soo never came. Instead, doctors appeared with portable equipment, checking Heijin's vitals while he thrashed and spat curses. They reported to tablets, to someone watching remotely. Hyun-soo was having him monitored like a particularly valuable laboratory specimen. On the 3rd evening, Hyun-soo appeared at the door, immaculate as always. "Dinner. Now. Go to hell. You can walk, or I'll carry you. Your choice." Heijin walked, hating himself for the small surrender. The dining room was obscenely opulent. a table that could seat 20 with only 2 places set at one end. Hyunsu sat and gestured for Hae-jin to do the same. "I've been considering names," Hyunsu said, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. "Traditional names. Something strong." Hae-jin picked up his plate and threw it. Crystal shattered against the wall behind Hyunsu's head, food splattering across priceless wallpaper. Hyunsu didn't flinch. He simply dabbed his mouth with a napkin and stood. "Tomorrow you'll eat properly. The baby needs nutrients, whether you cooperate or not. We can do this the easy way, or I'll have them insert a feeding tube." The door locked behind him again. That night, alone in his gilded prison, Hae-jin finally broke. He curled into a ball on the enormous bed, one hand pressed to his still flat stomach where something he hadn't chosen was growing. He cried until his throat was raw, until there were no tears left, until exhaustion dragged him under. And in the morning, when breakfast arrived, he ate. The doctor's office was located in the mansion's east wing, because of course Hyunsu had a fully equipped medical suite in his home. Dr. Yoon was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes that didn't quite mask her professional detachment. She smiled at Hae-jin as he was escorted in by 2 silent guards, Hyunsu following close behind like a shadow Hae-jin couldn't shake. "Mr. Park, please have a seat on the examination table." Dr. Yoon's voice was warm, practiced. "We'll do a standard 8-week checkup today." Hae-jin's eyes darted to the phone on her desk. If he could just grab it, dial emergency services, scream for help before they stopped him. He moved toward the table slowly, calculating distances, escape routes that didn't exist. "Dr. Yoon has been my family's physician for 15 years, Hyunsu said from his position by the door, reading Hae-jin's thoughts with unnerving accuracy. "She understands the importance of discretion." The doctor's smile never wavered, but something flickered in her expression, not quite guilt but acknowledgement. She was bought, paid for, just another piece of Hyunsu's carefully constructed prison. Hae-jin's last hope crumbled like ash. "Let's listen to the heartbeat, shall we?" Dr. Yoon squeezed gel onto Hae-jin's exposed stomach, and he flinched at the cold. The Doppler device pressed against his skin, moving in slow circles as she searched. Static filled the room. Then a sound like distant thunder, rapid and insistent. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Hae-jin's breath caught. "There we are," Dr. Yoon said softly. "Strong and healthy. 162 beats per minute. Perfect for 8 weeks." It was real. Not just an abstract consequence of violation, not just the reason for his captivity, but something alive. Something with a heartbeat that echoed through the room like an accusation and a plea all at once. Hae-jin's hand moved involuntarily to his stomach, fingers splaying across skin that would soon swell with proof of what had been taken from him. "Everything looks excellent," Dr. Yoon continued, oblivious to the war raging in Hae-jin's chest. "I'll want to see you weekly, given the circumstances." "Thank you, doctor." Hyunsu's voice was closer now. He'd moved to stand beside the examination table, his eyes fixed on the monitor, showing a tiny flickering blob. Something in his expression shifted, softened, just for a moment, before the cold mask returned. The morning sickness started that night. Hae-jin woke at 3 a.m. with his stomach churning, barely making it to the bathroom before losing the dinner he'd forced himself to eat. He retched until there was nothing left, then dry-heaved until his ribs ached. Sweat soaked through his shirt as he slumped against the cool tile floor. The door, the goddamn locked door, opened. Hyunsu stood silhouetted in the doorway, wearing only sleep pants, his hair disheveled in a way that made him look almost human. "Get out," Hae-jin managed between gasps. Instead, Hyunsu knelt beside him. Before Hae-jin could protest, a cool cloth pressed against the back of his neck. Hyunsu's other hand gathered Hae-jin's sweat-dampened hair away from his face with unexpected gentleness. "Don't touch me." But Hae-jin's voice had no strength behind it. "The morning sickness will pass. Usually by the 2nd trimester." Hyunsu's tone was matter of fact, but his hands remained steady and careful. Dr. Yoon left medication. "I'll have it brought up." Another wave of nausea hit, and Hae-jin found himself leaning into the support of the man who'd destroyed his life. He hated himself for it. Hated the way his treacherous body accepted comfort even from the source of his torment. Hated that those hands now holding him steady were the same ones that had held him down. When the worst passed, Hyunsu helped him to his feet and guided him back to bed with a care that felt like mockery. He brought water, crackers, the promised medication. Sat in the chair by the window until Hae-jin's breathing evened out. "Why?" Hae-jin whispered into the darkness, not sure what he was even asking. Why did you do this to me? Why are you being gentle now? Why does any of this matter? Hyunsu was quiet for so long that Haejin thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because you're carrying something precious. That makes you precious too. Property, Haejin thought bitterly. He means I'm valuable property now. But as sleep dragged him under, that heartbeat still echoed in his memory. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Relentless as a promise he hadn't chosen to make but couldn't unmake either. The 12-week ultrasound should have been routine. Dr. Yoon had explained it would be more detailed than the previous visits. Measurements, genetic screening, a clearer picture of the fetus. Haejin had steeled himself for another reminder of his imprisonment, another whoosh, whoosh, whoosh that made his resolve waver. He hadn't steeled himself for this. Dr. Yoon's hand stilled on the ultrasound wand, her professional composure cracking for the first time since Haejin had met her. She moved the device slowly across his belly, her eyes fixed on the monitor with an intensity that made his stomach drop for reasons that had nothing to do with morning sickness. Is something wrong? Hyunsu's voice was sharp, dangerous. He'd moved from his usual position by the door to stand directly beside the examination table, close enough that Haejin could feel the tension radiating from him. No, nothing's wrong, exactly. Dr. Yoon's voice was carefully neutral as she adjusted the screen angle. But I'm seeing something unexpected. Let me just confirm. The silence stretched. Haejin stared at the black and white image on the monitor, trying to make sense of the grainy shapes. There, that was the baby. He'd learned to recognize the small form. But there was something else, other shapes that looked similar, clustered together like. 4, Dr. Yoon said quietly. You're carrying quadruplets. The word didn't register at first. It couldn't. Haejin's mind rejected it the way his body had rejected food for those first terrible days. 4. For babies. For lives growing inside him. For reasons he'd never escape. For anchors binding him to this mansion and the man who'd put them there. That's not possible, Haejin heard himself say, his voice sounding distant and strange. It's rare, but it happens. Spontaneous quadruplets occur in approximately 1 in 700,000 pregnancies. Dr. Yoon was in full clinical mode now, a defense mechanism against the shock in the room. Given your omega biology, the odds are slightly higher, but still exceptionally uncommon. I'm seeing 4 distinct heartbeats for separate amniotic sacs. They all appear healthy and developing normally. 4 heartbeats. 4 separate whoosh 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 whooshes creating a symphony of Haejin's complete and utter entrapment. Hyunsu's hand found Haejin's shoulder, and he was too stunned to flinch away. When he looked up, the alpha's face was transformed. Not the cold mask or the calculated charm, but something raw and unguarded. Triumph blazed in those dark eyes, possessive and fierce, but underneath it was something else. Wonder, maybe. Or hunger for something Haejin couldn't name. 4, Hyunsu breathed, his fingers tightening. You're giving me 4. Not children. Not babies. For possessions. For proofs of ownership. The distinction made Haejin's skin crawl. This changes everything, Dr. Yoon continued, oblivious to the silent war being waged between her patient and his captor. Quadruplet pregnancies are extremely high risk. You'll need to be monitored much more closely. Bed rest will likely be required by the 2nd trimester. The risk of premature birth is. She'll have the best care available, Hyunsu interrupted. Whatever she needs. Whatever they need. She. The casual misgendering was automatic, thoughtless. Haejin was too numb to correct it. That night, Haejin lay in bed with his hands pressed to his still flat stomach, trying to comprehend the reality of 4. One baby had been an abstract concept, something he could plan around, escape from eventually. 4 babies meant a dangerous pregnancy that would leave him completely dependent on Hyunsu's mercy. 4 babies meant months of bed rest, of vulnerability, of being trapped not just by locks and guards, but by his own body's limitations. The sound of construction woke him 3 days later. Hammering, drilling, voices shouting instructions. When Haejin tried his door, he found it unlocked for the first time since his captivity began. He followed the noise through hallways he'd never been allowed to explore, to a wing of the mansion he hadn't known existed. The space was massive, larger than his family's entire apartment had been. Workers swarmed everywhere, tearing down walls, installing what looked like industrial-grade ventilation systems. Hyunsu stood in the center of it all, reviewing blueprints with an architect. 4 separate sleeping areas, Hyunsu was saying. Connected to a central monitoring station here. I want cameras in every corner. Temperature control in each section. Omega babies regulate heat differently. soundproofing between the sections so they don't wake each other. He looked up and saw Heijin standing in the doorway. Something in his expression softened. The nursery. I'm having it designed by the best pediatric specialists in Seoul. They're not even born yet. Heijin's voice sounded hollow to his own ears. They will be. And when they are, they'll have everything. Hyunsu moved closer, and Heijin found he didn't have the energy to back away. You'll have everything. I keep my promises, Heijin. I never asked for promises. I asked for freedom. Freedom to do what? Return to poverty? Watch your siblings go hungry. Hyunsu's hand moved to Heijin's stomach, and this time Heijin did flinch. You're carrying 4 lives now. 4 futures. Your freedom became irrelevant the moment you became theirs. The worst part was that he wasn't entirely wrong. By the 4th month, Heijin's body had declared open warfare against him. His belly swelled rapidly with 4 growing lives, throwing off his center of gravity until simple tasks became Herculean efforts. Bending to tie his shoes left him breathless and dizzy. Standing for more than 10 minutes made his back scream. His feet had swollen to twice their normal size, and his ankles looked like they belonged to someone else entirely. He hated needing help. Hated it with a fury that burned hotter than his hatred for Hyunsu himself. But pride didn't bend down to retrieve dropped items, and stubbornness didn't massage away the cramps that seized his calves at 2 a.m. Hyunsu did. It started the night Heijin woke gasping, his calf muscle locked in a vice grip of agony. He'd been trying to breathe through it when his door opened, because of course Hyunsu monitored him, even in sleep. Where? Hyunsu's voice cut through the darkness. Left leg. Calf. Heijin gritted out, too desperate for relief to maintain his usual hostility. Hyunsu's hands found the knot of muscle with surprising precision, working it with firm, practiced pressure until the cramp released. He didn't leave afterward. Instead, he propped Heijin's feet on pillows and continued massaging, working out smaller knots Heijin hadn't even registered. How did you know how to do that? The question escaped before Heijin could stop it. I read. Hyunsu's voice was matter-of-fact. Dr. Yoon provided literature on quadruplet pregnancies. Cramping is common. So is edema, joint pain, and insomnia. Over the following weeks, evidence of Hyunsu's reading appeared everywhere. Pregnancy pillows materialized in configurations Heijin hadn't known existed. Meals shifted to match Dr. Yoon's nutritional recommendations: high protein, low sodium, specific vitamins for fetal brain development. The bedroom temperature was adjusted nightly to account for Heijin's fluctuating body heat. It was suffocating and comforting in equal measure, and Heijin hated himself for noticing the difference. One evening, Hyunsu found him struggling to reach a book on a high shelf, his pregnant belly making the stretch impossible. Without a word, Hyunsu retrieved it, then settled into the chair by the window, his usual position during Heijin's waking hours. What was your childhood like? Heijin asked suddenly, breaking weeks of hostile silence. He wasn't sure why he asked. Maybe because the question had been building since he'd started noticing the way Hyunsu's hands shook slightly when adjusting Heijin's pillows, as if he were handling something unfathomably precious and terrifying. Hyunsu was quiet for so long that Heijin thought he wouldn't answer. Then violent. Brief. My parents were killed when I was 8. Rival faction. They burned our house with my mother still inside. Hyunsu's voice was clinical, discussing violence the way Dr. Yoon discussed fetal development. My father was shot in front of me. He spent 3 hours dying, long enough to tell me that power is the only thing that matters. That love makes you weak, makes you a target. That family must be taken and held, not hoped for. Heijin's hand moved involuntarily to his stomach. That's why I do everything I do. Hyunsu's eyes met his, and for the first time, Heijin saw past the cold calculation to something raw and damaged underneath. I watched my father die begging for mercy that never came because he'd been careless, let his guard down. He loved my mother too much, and it made him stupid. Made him vulnerable. So you decided to never be vulnerable. I decided to never be weak. Hyunsu stood, moving to the window. The setting sun cast his profile in sharp relief, beautiful and terrible, like a blade. When I found you, I knew. Young, desperate, fertile. Perfect for what I needed. I could have approached you properly, courted you. But that would have required trust. Faith that you'd choose me. And I've never been chosen, Heijin. Only feared or used. So you took the choice away. Yes. No apology, no justification. Just brutal honesty that somehow hurt worse than lies would have. Heijin absorbed this, turning it over in his mind like a stone. It didn't excuse anything. Nothing could excuse what Hyun-soo had done. But it contextualized it, made him something more complex than the monster Hae-jin had needed him to be. "What do you want for them?" Hae-jin asked quietly, his hands spanning his swollen belly. "The babies. What kind of life?" Hyun-soo turned, and something in his expression cracked. "Safe. I want them safe. Protected. I want them to never know what it's like to watch someone they love die because loving made them careless. You can't protect them from everything. Watch me." Later that night, as Hyun-soo adjusted Hae-jin's pillows for the third time with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly, Hae-jin realized something terrifying. Hyun-soo wasn't just obsessed with the babies. He was terrified. Terrified of failing them, of losing them, of proving his father right about love being weakness. It didn't make Hae-jin forgive him, but it made him understand, and understanding was its own kind of prison. One without locks or guards, but just as impossible to escape. Would you risk everything for someone you weren't supposed to love? Subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers, and comment where you're watching from. The attack came during Hae-jin's afternoon rest, when the mansion was quietest and Hyun-soo was supposedly in a meeting 3 floors down. Hae-jin had been drifting in that space between sleep and waking, one hand resting on his considerably swollen belly where 4 separate lives performed their daily gymnastics routine. The window exploded inward. Glass rained down like violent snow. Hae-jin's scream caught in his throat as 3 men in black tactical gear rappelled through the shattered frame with military precision. The first one reached him before he could even process what was happening, gloved hands grabbing his arm. Target acquired. 6 months pregnant, quadruplets confirmed. Moving to extraction point. The bedroom door didn't open. It exploded off its hinges. Hyun-soo moved like violence incarnate. No gun, no weapon, just raw, brutal fury channeled through a body that knew exactly how to kill. He caught the first attacker by the throat, and Hae-jin heard the wet crack of vertebrae shattering before the man even hit the ground. The second attacker raised a weapon. Hyun-soo was faster, impossibly fast, closing the distance and driving his thumb into the man's eye socket with surgical precision. The scream was inhuman, cut short when Hyun-soo twisted his neck with the same casual efficiency he used adjusting Hae-jin's pillows. The third man made it 2 steps toward the window before Hyun-soo caught him. What followed wasn't a fight, it was an execution. Hyun-soo slammed the attacker's head into the wall once, twice, 3 times, each impact punctuated by cracks that would haunt Hae-jin's nightmares. Blood splattered across expensive wallpaper in abstract patterns. The man's struggles weakened, stopped, but Hyun-soo didn't stop until his skull caved in completely. The entire attack lasted maybe 45 seconds. Silence crashed over the room like a wave. Hyun-soo stood in the center of the carnage, chest heaving, hands dripping red. His white shirt was ruined, painted with arterial spray and brain matter. He looked like something from a nightmare, beautiful and terrible and utterly inhuman. Then his eyes found Hae-jin, and something in them shattered. "Are you hurt?" His voice was raw, desperate. "Did they touch you?" "Did they?" "I'm fine." Hae-jin's voice came out steadier than he felt. "They didn't." Hyun-soo crossed the space between them, his blood-slicked hands hovering over Hae-jin's body without touching, as if afraid he'd contaminate something pure. "The glass. You could have glass cuts. Internal bleeding. Stress could trigger early labor. Dr. Yoon needs to." "I'm not hurt." But Hae-jin found himself reaching out, his hand closing around Hyun-soo's wrist. The alpha's pulse hammered beneath his fingers, wild and arrhythmic. "Breathe. I'm okay." "They're okay." Hyun-soo dropped to his knees beside the bed, his forehead pressing against Hae-jin's swollen belly. His entire body shook like he was coming apart at the seams. "If I'd been 30 seconds later. If they'd taken you. If they'd hurt them. But they didn't." Hae-jin's hand moved to Hyun-soo's hair without conscious thought, fingers threading through blood-matted strands. "You stopped them. I killed them." Hyun-soo's voice was muffled against Hae-jin's stomach. "Right in front of you. I know what you are." And Hae-jin did. Had always known, really, since that first terrible night. But this was different. This violence hadn't been directed at him. It had been directed for him, at threats that would have torn him and his babies away. "You're a monster. But right now you're my monster." The words hung between them, complicated and terrible, and somehow true. Guards flooded the room moments later. 12 men who'd been stationed throughout the mansion, who should have prevented this breach entirely. Hyun-soo rose, and the tender, broken man vanished, replaced by something cold and deadly. Find out how they got in. His voice could have cut steel. Find everyone who knew about this pregnancy. Find their families, their associates, everyone they've ever loved. And make them understand what happens when someone touches what's mine. The guards scattered like leaves before a storm. Dr. Yoon arrived within minutes, her medical bag already open. She examined Hae-jin with clinical efficiency while Hyun-soo watched from the doorway, still covered in blood, still shaking. "Everything's fine," she announced finally. "No injuries, baby's heartbeats are strong. But I want you under observation for the next 24 hours. After she left, Hyun-soo moved to the bathroom. Hae-jin heard water running, the shower turning on. When Hyun-soo emerged 20 minutes later, clean and dressed in fresh clothes, he looked almost human again. "Almost. I'm moving you to the safe room," he said. "Reinforced walls, bulletproof glass, dedicated security detail. No more risks. A prettier cage. A safer one." Hyun-soo sat in his usual chair, and for the first time since Hae-jin had been brought here, he looked exhausted. Vulnerable. "I meant what I said. I'll burn the world down before I let anyone take you." "Take them." Hae-jin believed him. That was the terrifying part. He believed every word, and some dark, damaged part of himself found comfort in that promise of violence. Because Hyun-soo was a monster, yes. But he was a monster who would kill for them without hesitation, who would drown soul in blood to keep them safe. The moral lines that should have been clear blurred into something uncomfortably gray. The safe room was exactly what Hyun-soo had promised, a fortress disguised as luxury. Reinforced steel behind silk wallpaper, bulletproof glass offering views of gardens Hae-jin still couldn't access, technology that could track a threat 3 blocks away. A beautiful prison within a prison, but Hae-jin had stopped fighting the locks weeks ago. His body had become its own cage, swollen and unwieldy with for lives that made every movement a negotiation. Month 7 arrived with Hae-jin feeling less like a person and more like a vessel about to burst. His belly was enormous, stretched tight as a drum, decorated with silvery lines that Dr. Yoon called badges of honor, and Hae-jin called evidence of his body's betrayal. He couldn't see his own feet anymore. Couldn't sleep for more than an hour before someone's elbow or foot jabbed his ribs. Couldn't remember what it felt like to exist as just himself, singular and whole. Hyun-soo had taken to reading to him in the evenings. Pregnancy books, mostly, his voice steady and clinical as he detailed fetal development milestones. It should have been invasive, another way of controlling the narrative of Hae-jin's body. Instead, it had become routine, almost comfortable. The monster who'd stolen his choices now recited facts about lung development with the same intensity he'd once used to kill 3 men without breaking a sweat. "At 7 months, they can hear us," Hyun-soo was saying, his usual position in the chair pulled closer to the bed than it used to be. "They recognize voices, respond to." The kick came from nowhere, sharp and insistent, like someone had punched Hae-jin's stomach from the inside. He gasped, his hand flying to the spot. Then another kick. And another. For different sensations from 4 different places. A coordinated assault that was somehow more real than anything that had come before. "There!" Hae-jin couldn't finish the sentence. His hand moved across his belly, chasing the movements. There, one of them was doing what felt like somersaults. And there, another pressing what had to be a foot against his ribs so hard it took his breath away. Without thinking, without the careful distance he'd maintained for 7 months, Hae-jin reached out and grabbed Hyun-soo's wrist. "Give me your hand. Quickly." Hyun-soo moved instantly, his book forgotten, dropping to his knees beside the bed. Hae-jin pressed the alpha's palm to his belly, right where the strongest kicks were happening. They both froze. Under Hyun-soo's hand, a tiny foot pushed out, creating a visible bump that traveled across Hae-jin's stomach like something from a science fiction film. Then another movement, this one from the left side. Then the right. All 4 babies seemed to have woken up at once, performing some kind of synchronized routine that was equal parts beautiful and alarming. Hyun-soo made a sound, broken and raw, something between a laugh and a sob. His other hand joined the first, spanning Hae-jin's belly, chasing each movement with reverent attention. Tears streaked down his face unchecked. "They're real," he whispered. "I mean, I knew they were real, but—" "I know." And Hae-jin did. The heartbeats had been abstract, the ultrasound images grainy and alien. But these insistent little kicks, these proof-of-life jabs, this was undeniable. Hyun-soo pressed his forehead to Hae-jin's belly, his shoulders shaking. "I did a terrible thing to you." The words came out choked, barely coherent. "I know that. I'll never stop knowing that. Every day I wake up and remember what I took from you. Your choice, your freedom, your chance to want this instead of being forced into it. Heijin's hand moved to Hyunsu's hair, fingers threading through the dark strands in a gesture that had become familiar despite everything. But you've given me something I thought was impossible for someone like me. Hyunsu looked up, his face devastated and hopeful in equal measure. A family, a purpose beyond power and violence, and proving I'm untouchable. These babies, they're everything I never dared want because wanting things makes you vulnerable. And you, don't. Heijin's voice was soft but firm. I don't deserve forgiveness. I know that, but I'm going to spend every day trying to deserve you anyway. Trying to deserve them. Even if it takes the rest of my life. The kicks continued, a constant reminder that they weren't just two people anymore. They were six, connected by biology and violence, and something neither of them had a name for yet. I don't forgive you, Heijin said finally, his hand still in Hyunsu's hair, the alpha's palms still warm against his belly where their children performed their acrobatics. I don't know if I ever will. What you did, there's no making that right. Hyunsu nodded, accepting the verdict without argument. But I don't know what I feel about you anymore either. The admission cost something, but Heijin forced himself to continue. I hate that you trapped me. Hate that you took my choices. Hate that my body isn't mine anymore, because of what you did. He paused, feeling another kick beneath Hyunsu's hand. But I can't deny that you've changed. That you're not the same man who drugged me in, and did what you did. And I can't deny that when I think about the future, when I imagine these babies being born and growing up, I see you in it. Even though I don't want to. Even though it would be easier if I didn't. What does that mean? Hyunsu's voice was barely audible. It means I'm trapped in more ways than just locked doors. Heijin forced himself to meet those dark eyes. It means this is complicated and messy and nothing like it should be. It means I don't have answers. Just four babies who deserve better than parents who started with violence. Then we give them better. Hyunsu's hands tightened on Heijin's belly, protective and possessive. Starting now. The babies kicked agreement, and despite everything, the violation, the captivity, the blood, and the fear, Heijin found himself believing it might be possible. Mrs. Choi had been a fixture in the mansion since Heijin's arrival, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She moved through the safe room with practiced efficiency, changing linens and arranging fresh flowers, her presence so constant it became invisible. Which was why Heijin startled when she closed the door and turned to face him with an expression that was anything but her usual professional neutrality. I need to tell you something, she said without preamble. About Mr. Kong. Heijin struggled to sit up, his enormous belly making the movement awkward. At 8 months with quadruplets, he looked ready to burst. If this is about convincing me to be grateful for my captivity. I watched him torture a man once. Mrs. Choi's voice was matter of fact. The man had stolen from the family. Mr. Kong was 16. His father made him do it, said it was time he learned what power really meant. The man begged for 3 hours before he died. And when it was over, I found the young master in the bathroom, vomiting until there was nothing left. Heijin went still. I'm not telling you this to excuse what he did to you. Mrs. Choi moved to the window, her silhouette backlit by afternoon sun. What he did was unforgivable. But you should know who made him into the man capable of such things. His father. His father was a monster. Made Mr. Kong watch his mother burn alive, told him that loving her had made them both weak. That attachment was a liability in their world. She turned, and her eyes held decades of witnessed horrors. After that, he trained the boy like you'd train a weapon. Stripped away everything soft, everything human. By the time the old man died when Mr. Kong was 20, there was nothing left but edges. And his first love? Heijin asked quietly, remembering Hyunsu's bitter comment about never being chosen. Mrs. Choi's expression darkened. Jiwoo. Beautiful Omega, sweet-natured. Mr. Kong fell completely, stupidly in love. Planned to leave the organization, build something legitimate. He told Jiwoo everything, every secret, every weakness, every rival. And Jiwoo was a plant, sent by the Kim family to destroy us from within. Heijin's hand moved to his belly instinctively, protective. The assassination attempt almost succeeded. Mr. Kong survived, but 12 of our people died. After that, Mrs. Choi's voice softened with something like pity. After that, he decided love was a weapon people used against you. That the only way to have family was to take it, control it, never let it become a vulnerability. That doesn't make what he did to me right. No, it doesn't. Mrs. Choi met his eyes steadily. But it explains why a man terrified of being chosen might drug someone instead of risk rejection. Why someone who equates love with betrayal might force what he's too damaged to ask for. Before Hae-jin could respond, pain lanced through his belly, sharp, wrong, nothing like the usual kicks and stretches. He gasped, doubling over as much as his size allowed. What? Mrs. Choi was at his side instantly. What's happening? I don't know. It hurts. Something's wrong. Another contraction seized him, and this time he felt it. The unmistakable tightening of his body preparing for something it was too early to do. Mrs. Choi hit the panic button Hyun-soo had installed. Within seconds, the room flooded with people, guards, Dr. Yoon materializing from somewhere, and Hyun-soo, who looked like he'd run up 8 flights of stairs. Contractions, Dr. Yoon announced after a quick examination. You're dilating. This is premature labor. No. Hae-jin's voice came out panicked. It's too early. They're not ready. It's only 34 weeks. Hospital. Now. Hyun-soo was already moving, scooping Hae-jin up despite protests, despite Dr. Yoon's assertion that they should wait for a stretcher. Get the cars. Clear the route. I want trauma teams standing by. The drive was a blur of pain and fear. Hyun-soo held Hae-jin's hand the entire time, his grip crushing, his voice a steady stream of reassurances that sounded like prayers. You're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. Just hold on. Please, just hold on. At the hospital, Hyun-soo's hospital, of course, the one he'd probably bought years ago for moments exactly like this. They pumped Hae-jin full of drugs to stop the contractions. Magnesium sulfate that made him feel disconnected from his own body. Steroids for the baby's lungs in case the worst happened. Hyun-soo never left. He sat beside the bed, both of Hae-jin's hands clasped in his. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Hae-jin saw him completely unraveled. No mask, no control, just raw terror. Don't leave me, Hyun-soo whispered as the drugs started working, as the contractions began to ease. I know I have no right to ask. I know what I did means you should run the moment you can. But please, please don't leave me. Don't leave us. I'm not dying, Hae-jin managed through the medication fog. I don't mean that. I mean after. When they're born and you're recovered, and you have every right to take them and disappear. I know I can't force you to stay. I won't force you. But I'm asking, begging, please give me a chance to be what you and they deserve. The contractions stopped. The baby's heartbeats remained strong. Dr. Yoon pronounced them out of immediate danger, but ordered strict bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. As they wheeled Hae-jin back to a private suite, Hyun-soo walked beside the bed, still holding his hand, still looking devastated. And Hae-jin realized with uncomfortable clarity, this wasn't possession anymore. This was something messier, more genuine, more terrifying. This was love, or Hyun-soo's broken version of it, desperate and damaged but undeniably real. The attack happened between the mansion and the hospital, on a stretch of road Hyun-soo's security had deemed safe after 3 weeks of the same route for Hae-jin's increasingly frequent checkups. At 36 weeks with quadruplets, every day felt like borrowed time. Dr. Yoon had been shocked they'd made it this far, that Hae-jin's body had held on despite every statistical probability screaming otherwise. The convoy consisted of 3 armored vehicles. Hae-jin rode in the middle one with Hyun-soo for guards and enough firepower to start a small war. It should have been enough. It wasn't. The explosion came from underneath, flipping their vehicle like a toy. Hae-jin felt himself airborne for a sickening moment before the world became a chaos of twisted metal and screaming. His seatbelt held, but his belly slammed against the restraint hard enough to make him cry out. Beside him, Hyun-soo was shouting orders, trying to shield Hae-jin's body with his own as gunfire erupted outside. The door was torn open. Hands grabbed Hae-jin, dragging him from the wreckage despite Hyun-soo's roar of fury. Hae-jin caught a glimpse of the alpha fighting 3 men at once, blood streaming from a gash on his temple, before something struck the back of his head and darkness swallowed everything. He woke to concrete beneath his cheek and the overwhelming smell of mildew and rust. The room was a basement, stripped bare except for a single chair and a camera on a tripod pointed directly at him. Pain radiated from his belly, not contractions, but the deep ache of impact, of bodies that had been jostled too violently. Finally awake, a man emerged from the shadows, older, with a face that might have been handsome before violence had carved it into something cruel. I'm Park Min-ho. Your alpha killed my brother 15 years ago. Took everything I had. And now I'm going to return the favor. Heijin tried to move, but his hands were zip-tied behind his back. At 9 months pregnant with quadruplets, he was as helpless as a beached whale. Please. The babies. Oh, I'm counting on the babies. Minho crouched beside him, his smile a vicious thing. 4 of them, I'm told. Hyunsu's perfect little heirs. I wonder how he'll feel watching me cut them out of you one by one. Terror turned Heijin's blood to ice. Minho pulled out a phone, dialed, and put it on speaker. Hyunsu answered on the first ring, his voice ragged. If you've heard him, he's alive. For now. Minho turned the camera on, and Heijin could see himself on the phone's screen. Disheveled, terrified, visibly pregnant. But I have a proposition. Your entire empire, every territory, every business, every asset, signed over to me within the hour. Plus you, on your knees, broadcasting your surrender to every family and soul. Do this, and maybe I let him live long enough to birth your bastards before I kill them. Done. Hyunsu's response was immediate, no hesitation. I'll sign everything. I'll broadcast whatever you want. Just don't hurt them. Please. Minho's smile faltered. You're not even going to negotiate? There's nothing to negotiate. You want my empire? It's yours. You want me humiliated? I'll crawl through broken glass on live television. You want my life? Take it. Just let him go. Let them go. Hyunsu, Heijin tried to speak, but Minho covered his mouth. How touching. The great Kong Hyunsu, brought to his knees by an omega whore. Minho laughed, but it sounded uncertain. You really would give up everything. For them? I'd give up everything twice. Have you ever been betrayed by family? Share your story, and tell us where you're watching from. The rescue came 90 minutes later. No negotiation, no waiting for Minho's demands to be met. Just overwhelming violence as Hyunsu's remaining forces located the basement and came through every entrance at once. The gunfire was deafening. Minho tried to use Heijin as a shield, pressing a knife to his throat, but Hyunsu shot him through the eye from across the room without breaking stride. Then Hyunsu was there, cutting Heijin's restraints with shaking hands, checking him for injuries with a desperation that bordered on mania. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? The babies, are they? I'm okay. We're okay. But even as Heijin said it, he felt the first contraction grip his belly. The stress, the impact, the terror, it was too much. Hyunsu, I think it's time. Hyunsu's face went white. He scooped Heijin up, carrying him toward waiting vehicles while shouting medical orders. In the ambulance, with contractions coming faster and Dr. Yoon's voice on speakerphone walking them through what to do if the babies came before they reached the hospital, Hyunsu gripped Heijin's hand like a lifeline. I'm sorry. The words tumbled out broken and desperate. I'm so sorry for all of it. For taking your choice, for trapping you, for making you a target because of what I am. When this is over, when they're born and you're safe, I'll let you go. I'll give you everything, money, protection, a new identity if you want. You can disappear to anywhere in the world, take them somewhere I can never find you. I won't trap you anymore. I just need to know you're safe. That they're safe. Another contraction seized Heijin, but through the pain, he found Hyunsu's eyes. What if I don't want to disappear? What? What if? Heijin gasped as the contraction peaked. What if I want to stay? Not because you're forcing me, not because I have no choice, but because I'm choosing it. Choosing you. Choosing this mess we've made. You can't mean that. After everything I've done. I'm not saying I forgive you. I'm saying I'm choosing anyway. Heijin squeezed Hyunsu's hand hard enough to hurt. I'm choosing to try. To build something real from this disaster. To give these babies parents who chose each other, even if the beginning was wrong. Hyunsu's face crumpled. He pressed his forehead to Heijin's, tears streaming unchecked. I don't deserve you. No, you don't. But I'm choosing you anyway. The hospital loomed ahead, and with it the future. Terrifying and uncertain and completely, finally, Heijin's choice to make. The delivery room was chaos incarnate. For separate medical teams, equipment covering every available surface, Dr. Yoon's calm voice cutting through Heijin's screams as his body tried to accomplish the impossible task of bringing 4 lives into the world at once. Hyunsu stood at his side through all of it, letting Heijin crush his hand until the bones ground together, whispering encouragement that sounded like prayers. When the pain became too much and Heijin sobbed that he couldn't do it, Hyunsu pressed their foreheads together and said, You can. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Just a little more. Jiho came first at 11:47 p.m., tiny and furious, his cries splitting the air like a declaration of war. Minjun followed 3 minutes later, quieter but no less determined. Suwa arrived at 11:53, and Haewon made her entrance at 11:56, as if she'd been waiting to make sure her siblings were okay before joining them. 4 babies. 2 boys, 2 girls. All premature, all smaller than they should be, but breathing, crying, alive. Hyunsu wept openly as nurses cleaned and assessed each infant, his hand never leaving Haejin's shoulder. When they finally placed all 4 babies on Haejin's chest for skin-to-skin contact, a squirming, mewling pile of new life, Hyunsu looked at him with something like reverence. "You did it," he whispered. "You brought them all here safely." "We did it," Haejin corrected, too exhausted to maintain old barriers. Recovery took 3 days in the hospital. Haejin's body had been through a war, and his mind wasn't far behind. But in the quiet moments between feedings and checkups, he and Hyunsu finally had the conversation that had been building for 9 months. "I want you to know," Hyunsu said, sitting in the chair he'd barely left since the birth, "that I've signed over full custody to you. Legal papers are already filed. You can take them anywhere, and I have no parental rights unless you choose to grant them." Haejin looked up from where Suwa slept against his chest. "What? You said you were choosing to stay, but I needed you to know you don't have to. That it's a real choice, not just different bars on the same cage." Hyunsu's hands twisted together. "I want you to stay. I want us to be a family. But only if you choose it freely, with full knowledge that you can leave anytime, and I won't stop you. And you'd just let me take your children away? They're not my children unless you decide they are." Hyunsu met his eyes. "I don't deserve them by right of biology or force. I only deserve them if I earn it every single day." Haejin was quiet for a long moment, studying the man who'd destroyed and then rebuilt his entire world. "I have conditions. Anything. Therapy. For you, for me, for us together. Real therapy with someone you don't own." Haejin shifted carefully, mindful of his healing body. "And I want my own bank accounts, my own space in whatever house we live in, my own life outside of being the Omega who carries your children. Done. I want us to start over. Not forget what happened. I'll never forget, but build something new that isn't founded on force. I'll spend the rest of my life building it with you." 6 months later, their home was a beautiful disaster. For babies meant 4 times the chaos. Someone was always crying, always hungry, always needing something. The mansion had been sold, replaced by a smaller house with a garden where children could actually play someday. Hyunsu had left the MAFIA entirely, liquidating legitimate businesses to fund a new venture protecting vulnerable Omegas from trafficking. Haejin watched him during a 2 a.m. feeding, this former monster now cradling Minjun with hands that had once killed without hesitation. Hyunsu attended therapy twice weekly, learning words like consent and boundaries and actually applying them. He asked permission before touching Haejin, every time, relearning intimacy from scratch. It wasn't perfect. Some days Haejin still woke from nightmares of that first terrible night. Some days Hyunsu's protective instincts crossed into controlling territory, and they had to stop and recalibrate. But they were trying, genuinely trying, to build something real from the wreckage. 5 years later, their living room was controlled chaos. Jiho was explaining an elaborate game to his sisters while Minjun quietly built a block tower. Haejin worked at his desk in the corner, reviewing applications for his Omega support organization, while Hyunsu attempted to referee before someone's block tower became a weapon. "Papa!" Suwa appeared at Haejin's elbow, her dark eyes curious. "How did you and Daddy meet?" Haejin and Hyunsu exchanged a look across the room. A conversation of glances that spoke of shared history, complicated truths, and the decision they'd made about when and how to tell their children the real story. "That's a big question, sweetheart," Haejin said carefully. Hyunsu joined them, lifting Suwa into his arms. "We'll tell you the whole story when you're older. But the short version is this: we didn't meet in a good way. Daddy made some very bad choices that hurt Papa. But you're together now," Suwa said, as if this solved everything. "We are," Haejin agreed. "Because after the bad beginning, we worked very, very hard to make a good middle. And we're still working on making a good ending. Every single day," Hyunsu added, his free hand finding Haejin's. "We choose each other every single day." It wasn't the fairy tale ending Haejin had once dreamed of, back before his life was torn apart and rebuilt. But watching their 4 children, healthy, loved, safe, and feeling Hyunsu's hand in his, steady and sure and earned through countless small choices to be better, Haejin realized it was something more valuable. It was real. Complicated, messy, built on foundations that should have crumbled but somehow held. It was theirs.